All right.
Good afternoon, everyone. It's really great to see you all together with us today. And today we are having the training on United Nations Convention of the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. And in addition to this, a specific focus on preparing alternative reports. And we have a wonderful trainer with us here, Maureen Aldry from the European Disability Forum. So my name is Lydia Best, and I am the president of the European Federation of Hard of Hearing People. With us today are some members of the board, but also staff who are running this training together with us. And I would like to say that if you would like to introduce yourself, please write your introduction, your name, and which organization you're from in the chat. Next slide. So we would like to make sure that we'll do the speech-to-text instructions, which are down there prepared by in ahead for you, so you can check how to turn on English captions in Zoom. But also there is text on tab link, which has different languages to choose from. And today agenda is the introduction to training, just general. Then we have a role of a committee to engage with, and then importance of alternative reporting. And finally, process of the CRPD, a short, we will be using it in the short term for national reviews. Finally, question and answers. Next slide. So from my side, I would like to introduce just a few articles, which are just a start when you want to look at how United Nations Convention on the Right of Persons with Disabilities and Hard of Hearing People actually are combined here. And where are we in this convention? So first of all, Article 1st, which is just about general purpose, talks about sensory impairments, and that means hearing loss is part of it. Article 2, which talks about definitions. In the definitions, it uses communication, which includes languages, display of text, etc. So again, captioning is included here, or subtitling or speech to text. And Article 3, it talks about, in the general principles, about full and effective participation and inclusion in the society, as well as accessibility. Again, there are all different aspects when it relates to hard of hearing people, which we can use and relate to. Finally, which might be even most important for everybody in our specific group, is the Article 4, because Article 4 is based on general obligations to the member states who sign up the declaration, and that is about promoting viability of devices and assistive technologies suitable for persons with disabilities, including early identification and interventions. Here we look at both hearing aids and cochlear implants. So this is just a short overview of where are we as hard of hearing people in the scheme of the whole CRPD convention. And I'm sure Maureen will give you more information and she will give you further information. But now I'm handing it back to Daria, who will conduct the training and who will support the whole event today. Thank you very much. I wish you a good training.
Thank you, Lydia, for the introduction. So from my side, I will just be moderating in the background during the whole training. So Maureen will guide you throughout the entire training on today's topic. From me, I just have a couple of notes on housekeeping. Please keep your microphones muted unless you want to speak or ask a question on the topic. And about the questions, we decided to go with either you raise your hand if you have a question and you would like to ask it yourself, or send your questions in the chat. I will be moderating and I can ask the written questions directly to Maureen while she's speaking. And that's all. So I will hand it over to your trainer for the day, Maureen Aldry, who's a policy coordinator at the European Disability Forum.
Thank you very much for having me. So just give me one moment to share my screen because I also have a PowerPoint. Actually, am I allowed to share my screen?
I think there should no.
Yes,
Yeah, we should be able to do
I
it.
see it. Okay.
That
Is
looks
it all good from your side? Perfect. So
great.
yes, we can start. So okay. So yes, good afternoon, everyone. I'm very happy to be with you for this training. So I work at the European Disability Forum as a human rights policy coordinator. And among my work there, I support our members and the member of our members to engage with the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. Um, Before we start, I was just wondering whether you could let me know whether some of you are already familiar and already participated in the review of your country by the committee. So I saw a few introduction in the chat. So there was a colleague from Germany, for example. Germany was evaluated last year by the committee. So curious to know whether some of you already know the process. If you can write it in the chat and then I will check. That's just also for my information. And then don't hesitate also if you have experience with the committee to jump in at some point to also share your own experience. So yes, don't hesitate to write in the chat whether you have or not taken part in the review of your country by the committee. So the program for this afternoon or this next hour and a half, so I will give you some basic information about the committee. That might be a reminder for some of you, but maybe others don't know so much about the committee. So I think it's good that we all have this information. Then I will explain how the committee evaluates countries. So what are the different steps of the process and how you can engage through your organization in this evaluation. With the concrete example of how you can prepare an alternative report. And then the last step would be to give you an overview of all the opportunities that you have with the committee, mostly in person. So the meeting you can have with the committee in Geneva. So as it was said at the beginning, also don't hesitate to write your question in the chat. And then I will also stop after each part of the training to check if you have any questions. So you can also wait for this moment if it's not a burning question to ask. So let's start with the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities. So you all know about the convention, which is a very important convention that has been ratified both by the EU and now all the EU member states, but also all the member of the Council of Europe. And so the UN Committee on the Rights of Persons with Disabilities is what we call the UN treaty body in charge of its monitoring its implementation. It's a United Nations committee that is composed of 18 members that are nominated for election by the states that have ratified the convention. There are elections every 2 years. So half of the committee usually is up for election every 2 years, and then the mandate is of 4 years, eligible for re-election once. The members do not represent their country when they're elected. They act as independent experts. And usually in terms of the composition, they are elected with consideration of representation in terms of geographic representation, gender balance, and participation of experts with disabilities. So you can see on the right side of the screen, that's an old photo of some of the committee members. I would say most of them are persons with disabilities themselves. What is important to know is that even if normally there should be equitable geographical distribution, at the moment there is only one expert from Europe, and not even from the EU, but from Switzerland, and Markus Schäfer, and the other experts are from other regions of the world, like Asia, Africa, or the Americas. So I put on the screen a few examples of the members that are quite important in the committee. So I mentioned Markus Schäfer. We have Gertrude Fefoame, who's the current chair of the committee, and she's from Ghana. Rosemary Keyes, who's one of the vice chair from Australia, and Amalia Gamio, who's from Mexico, and is one of the rapporteur of the committee. You can find on the webpage of the committee the biography and all the name of the committee members. It's also important to know that there's been election in June this year. And so the new committee members will start their mandate in January. During the election, there was for the first time the nomination of EU candidate who was elected. You might know her because she's someone who worked for the commission, Immaculada Plasencia. And so she will become a member of the committee as from next year. She won't be able, of course, to review the EU because she was nominated by and elected as part of the EU, but she will be able to participate in the review of all other countries. And that's actually a good asset because she's an expert on disability rights in the issue, and she understands very well the obligation of EU member states. The committee itself has meeting twice a year in Geneva. And during those meetings, the experts do several things. The main activity is to evaluate the implementation of the convention by the countries. So they establish a list of countries for review, and then I'll let you know a bit about the process, but that's the key activity of the committee, to know how well or badly the countries are implementing the obligation under the convention. They also have other activities. So for example, they adopt general comments and guidelines that explain in a bit more details what needs to be done to implement the convention. So for example, now they're working on a general comment on Article 11 on humanitarian action. There was a general comment on legal capacity, a general comment on women with disabilities. So there you can find more information on what your states need to do and what the rights in the convention really means. And there was also the adoption of guidelines. Sometimes the committee also adopts statements on specific issues, and they also adopt what is called individual communications and the result of inquiries. So it's for states that have ratified the optional protocol of the convention. It means that individuals or organizations can bring complaints of or information of rights violation to the committee, and then the committee experts adopt a decision on those things. So those are the key activities of the committee. Just to give you a few examples of how us at EDF we engage with the committee. So in the past, we have delivered statements at opening sessions of the committee. So we don't do it every time, but when there is a pressing issues, when there is usually after the election, the first session, we also try to have a statement to highlight our key priorities. That's when we usually attend the meeting in Geneva. We of course contributed and are contributing now to the review of the EU by the committee. Something that we started doing some years ago is to submit what we call an information note on European issues before each session. So to provide general information about issue that relates to the implementation of EU law or other European issues, so to sort of mainstream those issues in the review of European countries. So for example, a concrete example would be to have the committee systematically asking or adopting recommendation in relation to the implementation of the Accessibility Act, or about the Web Accessibility Directive, or about passenger rights, for example. So to really mainstream those issues, to raise the awareness of the committee members, and have recommendations that are adopted almost for every European countries on those issues. We support our members in engaging with the committee, so with the country reviews. We have training like we're having today with you, but we also have training for national members and their members. And sometimes we also attend the meeting in Geneva to support them. Another thing that we do is to make written submissions, for example, for general comments. So the general comment that I mentioned before, they're adopted usually after several rounds of consultations, written consultation, meetings. So EDF, we try to also engage in this process to bring our perspective, the perspective of our members. And then what we have also done in the past is to seek support from the committee on specific matters. So for example, now we have alerted the committee about a new proposal of a EU law that we believe is contrary to the CRPD. And so what the committee has done is send a letter to the commission about this. So it's more informal activities, but that's something that sometimes can be done. And that we have done at EDF. So I would say we have a good relationship with the committee and with the experts. And so it's not so difficult for us to engage in their work. And now I'm just showing a photo of a few meetings we did. I think this one was last year with the Austrian, actually, for the review of Austria. And on the right, I think it's with our German colleague. So yes, that's our participation in meeting in Geneva. I will already pause now in case there is any questions only regarding the CRPD committee. If there is any burning questions, otherwise I will continue with the country review process. I'm checking the chat, but I think there is no burning question at this stage. So let's continue. So what we believe is important as a first step to engage with the committee is to really understand the different steps of the evaluation of the countries. So that's what I will talk about now. So you all know that all countries that have ratified the convention normally needs to be reviewed by the committee. Sometimes that happens like fast, depending on when the country ratified the convention, and sometimes it takes a bit more time. Now we notice that it takes much more time because there is a lot of countries that have to be reviewed. So some countries have not been reviewed yet for the first time, while others have already had their second review. So there's a bit of difference among countries, but all the countries that have ratified the convention are to be reviewed by the committee. There are two procedures for that. The first one is what we call the ordinary procedure, and then there's a simplified procedure that only applies after the first review. So from the second review of a country and forwards. And then at the end of those one of the procedure, the committee adopts what is called concluding observation, which includes a list of concern per article and a list of recommendations that the countries need to implement. In terms of the procedure, so the ordinary procedure always starts by the state submitting its first report. So the states need to prepare a report where it describes, following the order of the convention, what it has done to implement the convention. So that's why for some countries, when the state has not sent a report, the committee has been waiting for years and years before being able to evaluate the countries. However, once the state has submitted its report, then the committee will establish a meeting during which it will adopt a list of issues. So a list of issues is a list of questions that it sends to the states to have clarification under each article of the convention. So it's a long list of questions under each article of the convention, which the states need to reply to. So then the states send its replies. And after that, the committee organized a dialogue with the states. So that's the meeting I mentioned in Geneva during the session. So it organized a dialogue where there is the committee, the expert of the committee, and the state delegation, during which the committee will ask for a clarification, update on the implementation of the convention. And then at the end of the dialogue, at the end of the session, the committee will adopt its concluding observation, including the recommendation. That's the normal procedure. When a country has already been evaluated in the past, the committee proposed a simplified procedure. In case of the simplified procedure, the state does not need to submit a new report. So that will be the committee who takes the lead in adopting a list of issues prior to reporting. So they don't even, they reflect, the committee will look at the concluding observation, they will look at information provided by civil society organization, and then they will make their own list of issues prior to reporting. And then that's the reply to this list of issues prior to reporting from the states that will be considered as the quote-unquote state report. When the committee receives the replies to the list of issues prior to reporting, then the process is the same. The committee will organize a dialogue with the states during one of its sessions, and then adopt a new concluding observation with recommendations. So it's really a cycle. So on the screen, I also put this information in form of a cycle, and then in between the new review, in between the adoption of the concluding observation and the new review, there is all this time, usually it's like 5 to 10 years sometimes, of implementation of the recommendation. So for example, the EU was evaluated for the first time in 2015, and next year, 2025, we will have the session with the dialogue for the second review of the EU. So you can see it's really 10 years since the first review of the EU until the second review. So quite a lot of time. What is important to look at is how you can contribute to this process. So I put on this side the simplified procedure. Let me check if I put the other one, yeah, right after. But basically, you can participate in the process at each step. So before the adoption of the list of issues or list of issues prior to reporting, you can submit information to the committee. That's the alternative report on which I will give you more information after. That's a very important opportunity, and the committee really expects receiving this type of information. Also, before the adoption of the list of issues or list of issues prior to reporting, you also have the opportunity to have what is called private meeting with the committee to explain again your issue and provide more information. And then the second step where you can provide information is after the list of issue was adopted. And usually we recommend to wait after the reply from the states, where you can update your report. You can criticize also the answer of the states. And again, you can have a private meeting with the committee before before it has this dialogue with the states and before it adopts its concluding observation. And then, of course, your role after the adoption of the concluding observation is to do advocacy and monitoring to see how well or not the recommendations are being translated into reality. So I know maybe for some of you it's really clear and straightforward, but maybe the process is more new to others. So I think it's also interesting to keep maybe this graph and this slide in mind to check where is your country at in the evaluation procedure. Is it the first review? Then you can look at the ordinary procedure. Is it the second review? Has your country accepted the simplified procedure? Has there been already the adoption of the list of issues? And then you can basically place yourself on the timeline and see what you can do. So I will I already shared the PowerPoint, so you will receive it, but don't hesitate to come back to these slides to understand the process. Important for you to know. So in the next year, there will be the review of few European countries. So I mentioned the EU will be reviewed next year at EDF, and with our members, we work in the preparation of our European reports, and we'll also be in Geneva. But there will also be the adoption of list of issues for Armenia and Moldova in the spring, and then in the summer there will be the review of Finland. So for Finland there was already the adoption of the list of issues, and now that would be the session with the adoption of the recommendation. And then there will also be the adoption of the list of issues for Iceland, Ireland, Latvia, and Luxembourg. So under the ordinary procedure, and the adoption of the list of issue priority reporting for Cyprus. So if you are from any of those countries, mark it in your agenda if you want to participate, because it means that you will need, if you want to do so, to prepare your alternative report. If your country is not on the list here, you can check, and I put the link at the end of my presentation. There is a temporary, no, what's it called? Agenda calendar that changed quite a lot, but that can give you an idea of when your country will be up for review. And then, as I'm showing on the screen, when you go on the webpage of the UNCRPD committee under session, you have the list of the upcoming session, the past session as well. So you can also find when your countries was reviewed in the past, and then the list of future session. So you can always check on this webpage whether there is more information about the review of your country. Any question on this section on the review process? Otherwise, I keep going. Okay, let's continue. So now we'll talk a bit more about what you can do concretely. So what an alternative report means, and also the opportunities in Geneva. So what is an alternative report and why is it important? So this type of report is extremely important for the UNCRPD committee, because you can imagine that if it does not receive information from civil society, most of the information will be from the states, who very often want to say that things are perfect, that they're doing very well in terms of implementing the convention. So the objective is to provide complementary information to the committee, also more critical information about the issues faced by persons with disabilities, what is really happening on the ground, the barriers that you face. It's also important to ensure that your priorities are well known and taken into account in the review. So there are many issues in general in many countries, and the committee has to select the type of recommendation it will adopt. So by giving this information, by suggesting recommendation it can adopt, that helps to make sure that your priorities are reflected. For you, it can also bring more awareness on the challenge and perspective of hard of hearing people in your countries. So you can imagine that it's the same when we do it as EDF, that the National Disability Council that cover all type of disabilities might not be able in the report to provide so much information about hard of hearing people. Whereas if your organization submit a report, you can provide much more information with more detail, with clearer recommendation on the issues that you are facing. And so really the outcome is to have your perspective included both in the list of questions, in the list of issues that is being adopted, and in the concluding observation. And then using those list of issues, those observation for your own advocacy once they are adopted. In terms of requirement, so there is a document that is a guideline on participation of organization of persons with disabilities in the work of the committee that provide you with all the information you need to know about requirements. But the main one are the word limits. So normally the report should not be longer than 10,700 words. That's usually the case for coalition. For disability-specific organization, they recommend to have reports that are no longer than 5,000 words. However, there is a lot of flexibility in this. We do recommend not to submit reports that are too long because the committee members will not have time to read everything. So it's better to have something a bit shorter with clear priorities. And that also highlights the type of recommendation or questions you want the committee to adopt. It's also good to coordinate actually with the Disability Council in your country. So you also have the option to contribute, hopefully, to their reports and then to have your own report if you wish so. In the report, you need also to identify yourself and to describe who you are as an organization. So it's clear for the committee who you represent. Yes, is there a question?
Yes, so I just wanted to jump in to say that we just received a question on what are the rights of hard of hearing people, if you have an answer to this question. Ricardo, do you want to maybe expand on your question a little bit? Okay, maybe.
Yes, otherwise what I can say, so that's also what I will explain later on, is that you need to see which article of the convention are most relevant. So normally, like, of course, the whole convention applies to you, but maybe there are areas that are more important. So for example, in
we're
terms
not
of...
able to hear you anymore for some reason.
Do you hear me? Do you hear me now?
I don't know if this is a...
Let me check.
Ah, you're back now.
Okay. Good. So I will mention it also after, but the whole convention apply to all persons with disabilities. However, there are articles that may be more relevant to you and to your organization. So for example, it can be on inclusion and participation, Article 4.3. Do you feel that hard of hearing people organization are actually being consulted by the government when there are consultation or events? Is captioning provided? It can be in relation to Article 9 on accessibility also, or Article 23 on information and communication. It can be about assistive devices, employment, or access to education. So anything that you think is a priority for you, like the whole convention, of course, apply to you, but then you can see at national level what are the main barriers, and only reports on the article that cover those barriers, basically. And then, Ricardo, if the answer is not clear or if you have another question, don't hesitate to clarify in the chat what you want me to cover. So to go back to the requirements, so I was saying you are expected to describe your organization. So it's important that you say that you are an organization of persons with disabilities, which if it's the case, and that you represent hard of hearing people. So the committee understand that you're not, like a service provider, or you're not an association of family. I mean, those can also, of course, with no problem, submit the alternative reports, but the committee needs to know which type of organization that you are. It's also very much suggested that you have an executive summary of 1 or 2 pages where you highlight your priorities, the main issues that you see in your countries. So for committee members that might not be able to read the full report, that they have an overview of the issues. And then in terms of the structures, you need to follow the order of the convention. So as I mentioned, you don't need normally to cover all the articles. The Disability Council that represents all type of disabilities, we will usually report on each article of the convention, so from Article 1 to 33. But as a disability-specific organization, you can pick and choose which are the articles that are more important to you, as I just said. And this is for you to really decide in terms of the barriers that exist in your country, the priorities. I could mention, other articles are the one on children with disabilities, on women with disabilities. The committee pays more and more attention actually at intersectionality. So that would be quite important to cover those issues. They also look at issue of violence or access to justice. So you could say what type of issues hard of hearing people face when they access justice, when they are victim of violence. There is an article on data collection, so you can explain whether there is data that is being collected and research being done on hard of hearing people. Those are all things you can adapt depending on the national context. In terms of deadlines, so it's important that you start preparing your report in advance, because usually the strict deadlines to submit the document will be up to 3 weeks before the session. When a state is being reviewed, usually it's good to have it ready at least at the latest a month before the session, because some experts of the committee, at this stage, they are already drafting either the list of issue or the concluding observation. And then formally, normally for the list of issue prior reporting, they say it should be up to 4 months prior to the beginning of the session, but there's been a lot of flexibility on this point, so 2 to 1 month before the session is okay. but I still need to share the official requirement from the document. But just keep in mind that 1 month before the start of the session, your document should be ready. So usually the session starts in March, so we'll say end of January, you need to submit your document, and then for the summer session, early July, you need to send your document for the session that starts in August. It's also a work that takes a lot of time because usually there is a lot of like research that needs to be done, consultation with your own members. So it's good to start well in advance, as soon as you know that your country will be reviewed, or even you know that it's probably gonna come soon, you can start working on it. Now a few tips that we share for the preparation of those reports. So as I mentioned, the big majority of the committee members are not from Europe. They might not know anything about your country. They certainly do not know usually what government you have in place, what's the social security system, for example. They don't know any of the acronyms. So it's important to keep that in mind when you write and to be straightforward, short, and clear. So do not use acronyms, or if there's something that you will repeat a lot, you need to re-explain it every time. Try to have maybe like someone from another organization or another colleague reading it with a fresh mind, or someone who's not even like, you know, really fully in the disability movement, if you have the opportunity to see if the information is clear. It's very important that you address and contrast the information that is provided by our government, whether it's in its report on reply to the list of issues, so that you bring either more information or that you are critical about the information given. So for example, for us, for the review of the EU, we have checked the reply to the list of issues. And in this reply, the Commission, for example, said that they will adopt a specific document and a strategy, and that has still not happened. So in our alternative report, we will say, contrary to what was announced in the replies of the list of issues, this has still not happened, and we have not been consulted on this topic. That's an example of how you can contrast the information. You can imagine, for example, if the government said, well, we will ensure that more support is provided in education for hard of hearing children, but then nothing has happened. You can also say, contrary to what the government said, we know that it has not happened, or that happened in only one region, whereas in the other, nothing has been happening. Really focus on what your country does or does not do, but not what you are doing. So always keep in mind when you write that the review, the evaluation is for your country. We know that sometimes, like in many countries, organization of persons with disabilities sometimes also act as support, like provide program for persons with disabilities and so on. This is great, but that should not necessarily be included in the reports, unless you want to say that, for example, because of the lack of action of the government, your organization had to take that role. But that will be an example on the gaps, basically, that still exist in your countries. Another very important point is to never write something that is contrary to the convention. So make sure that you understand well the articles on which you are reporting, because that will decrease the value of your report if the experts think that you don't really want to respect and protect the right under the convention. We know that in some cases there might be some debates or area that are less clear for organization, or where organization have different views. But in those cases, I would say do not address that in the report. To give a concrete example, special schools. Special schools are against the convention. And And even if in some countries, organization of persons with disabilities will say, well, we do believe that special schools sometimes are more beneficial for students with disabilities, for children with disabilities. You cannot write in your report that there is a lack of investment of special schools, because the committee will just say no. What is needed is investment in mainstream education for children with disabilities, and then they will feel that as an organization you promote special schools, which is against the convention. So if there is, for example, these questions, I would say better not to put it at all in the report and not to address it, or focus on points that are really aligning with the convention. Another very, very important thing for the committee is that your report refer to sources as much as possible. So you can refer to legislation, to policy plan, to data that is available either from your country, so country data, but also data coming from research, from university, from your own organization if you conducted survey. You can also refer to court cases, testimonies, research paper. So try to have those links as much as possible in your report. I would always start with legislation when it's relevant. So let's say on Article 5 on equality and non-discrimination, you could give an overview of the equality legislation and then say, well, in implementation, or if there is strategy, let's say equality or disability strategy, refer to this, put a link, and then explain to which extent it addresses issue faced by hard of hearing people. Are they included in those policy and plans? And then do you have data that show how many people or how much people, hard of hearing people, are being discriminated against? So really try to refer to sources and to include links when the documents are available online. It does not matter if the document is not in English, because committee members can use translation tools, but they really want to have access to the documents. So those would be our main tips for the alternative reports. What we do at ADF, mostly with our members, but when there are also other organizations participating, we can also do it, is to give comments on the report and feedbacks. What I forgot to mention is that so depending on the step of the procedure, you are also advised to propose a list of questions, so your own list of issues, and propose your own recommendation. So under each article, you can have suggested question or suggested recommendation. So it's easier for the committee to know what you want them to address. Another thing would be also to work and to try to coordinate with the other organization that take part in the review process. So I mentioned your National Disability Council. So they can also refer to the main barrier that you face. And then maybe also other organizations that you might be aware are participating. Yes, is there a question?
Yes, I wanted to quickly jump in and ask about from our side. So I just wondering if you could answer, why do you think it's important for hard of hearing organizations to present their own national reports to the committee, just also as a call for action for our community that we represent?
Well, as I mentioned, the other report that might be sent to the committee, they might not fully show all the issues that hard of hearing people face at national level. So there is a gap in the information, and that gap can only be resolved if the people who are directly affected actually bring this information to the committee. That's also the more the committee will also receive a report from hard of hearing organization, the more it will also take the habit to ask questions to the states about those issues. So it takes time. It takes time, but it's beneficial then not only for your country, but for other countries where maybe the organization will not provide information, but the committee will already have gained, this automatic way to ask questions about the issues. And then the second thing is, well, then if there are specific recommendations, it's really helpful for advocacy at national level. So sometimes, of course, like countries do not really listen so well to the committee. So that's a reality as well. Like it's not because there are recommendation that the country, like the government will change everything, but that can really help you to say like, look, like this is what the committee said back in 2018, and you can, follow up with the committee. And so we do believe it's very important to engage with the committee on this.
Thank you.
Is there any other question specifically on the alternative report? I didn't open the chat, but
No questions in the chat, but I would also encourage questions in this moment. One question also from one of our team members at FH. Which specific areas, if any, does the report usually cover?
well, again, it depends on what's happened, what's the situation at national level. But I would say something that you should really consider covering is what's the national disability framework, and whether first you have been consulted in the creation of this framework. So for example, the disability strategy, and whether this strategy include hard of hearing people. So are there specific actions to address the issue that you face? I would say that's something that you should definitely cover. Equality and non-discrimination, if you have data. The issue of intersectionality, so looking at women with disabilities to children with disabilities. Then accessibility is a very important topic. So Article 9 on accessibility, which you can link to Article 23 on information and communication. And then I would also say then probably, education, employment, access to health, and then the issue of data. But of course, you can look at all the articles, so get more familiar with the articles of the convention and see what is more relevant for you. Oh yes, and Article 11, yeah, indeed, is very important. That came up a lot lately. During COVID-19 and lately, in terms also of emergency, situation of emergency, the issue of captioning and providing information is something that our members also at national level have been looking more and more into. Okay, then I will just move to, let me check. Okay, to the last part, which is the meetings in Geneva, and then we can see if there are more questions. So when you submit your alternative reports, you also have the opportunity to tell the committee whether you want to brief them in Geneva. Before it was possible to do remote briefing, but I have to say that now there's less and less opportunity. So most of the meetings now do happen in Geneva. There is a formal private briefing that takes place between organization of persons with disabilities and the committee during the session or the pre-session. During this private briefing, you have all the organization of persons with disabilities and civil society organization who have submitted reports, who can have a really short statement. And after this statement, the committee members will ask questions on anything that they want. So it can be related to your statement or to your report or something completely different. And then you will have some time to answer. Usually the meeting is an hour and a half, but then if you cannot answer everything, there is always the opportunity to provide information in written. The meeting, as I mentioned, is private, so it's a confidential meeting. You cannot say what has been shared during the meeting by the other organization, what committee members have asked. And it's to basically protect the confidentiality of the discussion and of everyone. When you are in Geneva, you can also have informal meetings with committee members, so especially the country reporter, who is the one leading on the evaluation. And those are helpful when you want to basically do more advocacy for your priorities to be included in the documents, or to clarify any issues. So this we facilitate with the International Disability Alliance, was some staff based in Geneva who coordinates with the expert of the committee, with the secretariat of the committee, and with all organizations that come to Geneva. But it's really a good opportunity, and usually we do notice that alternative reports are essential, but there are always questions that need to be clarified at the end, because or not only question that need to be clarified, but also sometimes new topics. So from the moment you send the alternative reports to the moment of the session, even if it's 1 month, maybe there are things that needs to be updated. Maybe like something happened at national level that you want to tell the committee about. So the information is not, there is no like a time limit, basically. It's really until the day the committee adopt the concrete observation that you can still provide information. So if something happens 2 days before the session, that is important for people with disability, the committee can also address that in the review. Yes, so you need to let the committee know in advance when you send your report whether you want to participate in the briefing in Geneva. There is the registration process and so on. I will not go into all the details, but just know that there is also this opportunity, which is a good one. And that usually most of the organizations who submit alternative reports, they also try to participate in Geneva. However, of course, there is a cost, like nothing is reimbursed by the committee. So it also means that you need to budget in advance a trip to Geneva. So that's also important for you to know. And this is it from my side. So if you have any other question or thing you want to tell others about, I think I saw in the chat that there is a colleague from Croatia who took part in the review, the first and second review of Croatia. So feel free also to share your experience, or anyone else. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Maureen, for your presentation. Just to highlight the urge for any questions, don't be shy. I think it's a good space to ask those.
And I forgot, well, maybe my last slide, that's just to mention that everyone can have access to the different documents. So the PowerPoint will be shared with everyone. So if you also have questions after you check the PowerPoint or any of the document, there is my email address, so you can also contact me. But we also have a specific guide on how to get involved in the country evaluation. So there again, you can find all the information. You can find the total, well, that's the word I was looking for, tentative timeline of country reviews. So to know when your country might be reviewed next. Yeah. And EDF will have actually another training on CRPD and CEDAW, so the UN Committee on the elimination of discrimination against women on the 29th of October. So some of the content might be a bit repetitive, but if you want to share with your colleagues, it's open for a member and a member for members. So anyone here, our colleagues are invited. So I also share the link and can be disseminated.
Yeah, absolutely. And this is something new we've been doing at FH, but sometimes we send our members sort of informative emails with upcoming trainings or upcoming events, surveys that are happening in our sphere. So definitely, if I received information for that through EDF, we'll be sharing that with our members as well. It looks like we don't have a very active, questions in the chat. I also don't see any hands raised, unless I missed anything, but it might be a short session today. Thank you
That's
very
good. Usually I schedule 1 hour and then I always, put more in case there are urgent questions. Oh, I think there's a question now in the
yeah.
chat actually.
Yeah. So it's again from Lavinia from FH about intersectionality. If you could explain or expand a little bit on how it is enforced. Are there subcommittees intersecting disability with other discriminations?
So it's each UN treaty body that decides how they want to address intersectionality. However, there is more and more work that is being done by each committee to bring the perspective, the intersectionality perspective. So what they might do sometimes, but what you can also do in your report is to check whether your country has been evaluated by another committee. So for example, the Committee on the Right of the Child or the Committee on Women's Rights, so the CEDAW, and whether there had been specific recommendation or questions regarding people with disability, hard of hearing people, and then bring that information to the CRPD committee. So for example, let's say your country is reviewed next year, and in 2019, the committee said that there was a lot of discrimination against hard of hearing and deaf children, especially in education, and that the country need to adopt a strategy. Then you can bring that to the CRPD committee and say, well, already back then, the other committee was talking about this also when it came to I don't know, like girls with disabilities. So that's a way to do it. However, there's still a lot of work to be done by each committee to be more intersectional. So that's why we also advise if yourself you have information about people with intersecting disability, identities, to really bring that to the community. So at ADF we do that in relation to LGBTI people with disabilities, to Roma people with disabilities, actually racialized people with disabilities in general, women with disabilities. We also take the age component. That's also a very important one that you might want to address. So is there age limits to access to specific assistance, assistive technology or device? That can be, like, for example, hearing aid that might be reimbursed or provided at a lower cost until a specific age, and then when you reach 70 or 65, they will say, well, at this age, like everyone needs one, so the compensation is not the same. So yeah, there is no subcommittee at the UN, and there is a lot of advocacy work that's still to be done.
Perfect. I hope that answers Lavinia's question. And all right.
Great, then thank you very much.
Thank you very much for providing the training for members, Marine. It was greatly appreciated. As I mentioned in the chat to some of our members joining here, I will send Marine's presentation with the link she has included. I am happy to send your email as well if you're okay with that, for further questions. but also don't hesitate to reach out to FHO for any follow-up questions that you might have. And thank you so much for your time. And we'll see you again for another training later on.
Have a good afternoon, everyone.
Have a
Bye.
nice afternoon.